All right. Excellent. Well, we'll start with that. First off, thank you very much for the introduction. I greatly appreciate it. We learned a couple of things from the last webinar in terms of how we've approached things. So what I'd like to do is, if you've got questions, please absolutely put them in the Q&A session. That would be great. What I tried to do last time was kind of respond to the questions as we were through the slides. And I think what we'd prefer to do is kind of hold those to the end and then answer them all in one block. And if we can't get an answer to them, during today's conversation, is I've got a lot of really smart friends who know a lot about Operations Manager, and as you saw the last webinar that we went through, we submitted those Q&A for us as well as potential folks in getting their perspective. So if I can't answer it, hopefully I know the person who can answer it. So with that, let me start off with an agenda. My first and primary focus and almost the entire discussion will be around considerations when migrating to Operations Manager 2012. We'll do a brief stopover with release dates related to Ops Manager 2012. We'll talk about live maps and how we're going to handle things between live maps and Ops 2012. If you're interested in what the functionality looks like and how that works, definitely go back to our last webinar because the guys did a great demonstration of look and feel for what this is going to look like within Ops 2012 and live maps. What we're focusing on today is kind of some frequently asked questions that I would expect that people would want to know related to Ops 2012 and Civision live maps in particular. And then my goal is to leave enough time for us at the end for Q&A, so you can ask any questions that you'd want to know related to this material. When Civision and I talked about this, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we covered was I didn't just want to present the migration set or approaches in terms of you can migrate this way, and this way. What my goal was to be able to kind of round this out to a larger vision. All right, so let me start with the wonderful section of assessing. So what I've broken these into is a series of something-IT. So from an assessment perspective, we need to think about what we're doing this for. I work very much from the perspective of the Cubby approach of first to understand and then to be understood. And the reason why I mention all of this is I'm not going to go into in-depth on all this, so I don't think that I'm going to bore everybody through, the internals of how you assess an organization and what you're doing with Operations Manager. But I do want to hit on the key point here that we really have to understand what you're trying to do before you do it. In the book, we reference it as ready, aim, shoot, as opposed to ready, shoot, aim. The other way that from another example I would use on this is the measure twice and cut once, because you only get really one good shot at this. So we want to make sure when you're going through these things that you're gathering the information that you need to ahead of time. First off, you need to gather your business and your technical requirements. Examples of these, some people may want automated ticket creation. So I have an alert that occurred in Ops 2012 and I want to automatically generate a ticket based upon this particular criteria. If that's a business requirement or a technical requirement, that's great. High availability may be another question in terms of how you have to design these things. Does your monitoring solution have to itself be highly available, or is it in place to be able to help other people or other applications maintain their level of high availability? Virtualization, obviously this is a big one for everybody. Virtualization, is it a requirement to virtualize everything? Is it a requirement to not virtualize some stuff within your environment? Get that identified ahead of time. In terms of what can be virtualized, basically everything in Ops Manager can now be virtualized, and we'll talk in more detail about that. Are dashboards a requirement? And if so, answering just our dashboards a requirement, yes, it does not actually require, explain the requirement. Didn't know, as an example, what types of dashboard views. Do I want to have a network operations center where I can see the availability of all my high-level distributed applications? Do I need a single dashboard view that's going to tell me the high levels of, the statistics associated with my different applications? Do I need a service-level dashboard so I can see the availability of all these people? You need to pull those down and identify exactly what are the dashboarding requirements, if there are dashboarding requirements. Do we have full autonomy in one location? So as an example, a location over in Ireland, and Ireland needs to be completely autonomous. They need to be able to monitor their systems and nobody can touch their stuff. Those types of things we need to know. We need to look at the administrative model, which falls into the autonomy pieces as well. So do we have one centralized IT, or do we have it dispersed? And if we have it dispersed, do we have areas where they have to completely locally control their systems? We also need to identify the monitoring solutions. So what are in place right now? So are we using Operations Manager 2007 R2 as an example, or MOM 2005, or a competitive product? Those are things that we need to know so we can identify what we want to do to be able to pull this all together. Service level requirements. Are there formalized SLAs in the organization? If not, do we need to help develop formalized SLAs? And a big one here to definitely consider is, has Ops Manager been tried before? If this is a great question to ask, and it's oftentimes, at least as a consultant, it's one of those that you may not want to ask, because it's kind of a tough one, but it is a critical question to ask. Because what we're looking here is, if Ops Manager's been tried before, or maybe they say, you know, we did it during MOM 2005, who knows, maybe even back in MOM 2000, we want to know why it was tried, why it's not still here. Because if there was a failure in that deployment before, we can learn what happened before. It's far better to know about it before you start the deployment than it is afterwards having somebody go, well, yeah, we ran into this with MOM. Okay, well, great. At least we know ahead of time what we're looking at. So, if so, what happened? Are we going to try to do an upgrade from your existing environment? Who's going to own Operations Manager? If you walk away from this with one thing in terms of a critical success for a successful Operations Manager deployment a year later, this is it. In your organization, there has to be somebody who wants to live and breathe and own Operations Manager. If there's not, then the likelihood of your deployment being still in existence a year later is significantly less than it is if you have somebody who really wants to own this. So if you don't have somebody who wants to own Ops Manager, I would highly recommend looking to hiring somebody who really wants to live on this particular product. So we've assessed it. We've pulled this all together. Now we need to look at planning and design. So how do we handle this from a plan and design perspective? So from a planning perspective, as I mentioned before, we want to look at this from the ready, aim, shoot. Know what we're going to aim for, know what we're going to do, and then have a plan to actually execute it. Next thing, and this is even if you're not a consultant, even if you're an in-house IT person and you want to be able to deploy Ops Manager, write a design document. Take all of the assessment information that you've learned before, take your business requirements, pull your design together, gather this all into a singular document which includes a Visio diagram explaining the topology and layout associated with your System Center Ops Manager environment. And know what steps you're going to be performed. Are you going to do a proof of concept, a pilot, or a production migration? Maybe all of those. Are you going to have to migrate these systems? Let me differentiate, by the way. A proof of concept should be done in an isolated environment. So not I'm going to do a proof of concept in my production environment. If you're going to do a proof of concept in your production, I call that a pilot. The reason why the difference is there is in a POC, you can do it completely isolated. You don't have to worry about breaking anything. By the time you go to pilot, you're into production, but you're deploying to a smaller subset, and a production deployment is when you're deploying to everything in the environment. You need to look at, you're going to do the migration as well. You have current systems, and we'll talk about during this the different options available in terms of how you can migrate into Ops 2012. You need to make sure ahead of time that you've identified your accounts. You've got them created ahead of time, because the last thing you want is to have to go through change controls to be able to generate accounts for it. You're still going to need the same accounts that you had before, your Operations Manager, your OM MSAA, Management Server Action account. You're going to need a data reader account, a data writer account, things of those nature. So not really any of that has changed since 2007. Key concepts when you're designing. The first is keep it simple. Only add complexity to meet a business requirement. And I know that sounds like a given. I mean, who would do this? But I've seen organizations that want to deploy or want to do something with it just because it's really cool. Really cool is great, but oftentimes that really cool adds complexity into it, which in turn makes it more difficult to be able to manage the solution. So start from the basics and then add on top of that. We talked briefly about virtualization, but virtualization is supported on all the different Ops Manager components. I will put in the caveat, and there's discussion back and forth on this particular one, but I personally don't generally want to do virtualization of the databases except in smaller environments. There's a debate, on the fence about, can you virtualize SQL servers, large SQL servers, large Exchange servers, things like that. My general stance has been you can, but you may not get the disk performance that you're looking for. What about a all-in-one? Can you do an all-in-one with an Ops Manager? Yes, you can. And I highly, highly recommend this. This is great for a lab. This is to be able to just bring up all of Operations Manager. So your MS or your MS, as we're going to talk about, bringing up the databases on it as well, reporting components, all of those can coexist on a single box. Just put a lot of resources to it, of course. You can't coexist a gateway and a management server on the same box. Other than that, you can bring up an entire environment which does nothing but monitor whatever system you've got there, but it lets you do things like testing management packs. You want to be able to upgrade the management packs in your environment. Great to be able to go through it in the lab first. One of my biggest favorites on this has actually been able to do cumulative updates, CU tests, things of that nature. From a design management group perspective, you want to start from one management group. There's no reason to start from two. But then we add management groups for things like QA and test versus production. There's been a lot of discussion around, do we need to have a separate environment for QA, or can we put it all together into production? The answer, unfortunately, is you can do either. So the QA test production altogether works like this. You monitor everything from a singular management group, but then you create dynamic groups which represent your QA and test systems, and then you change your subscriptions and notifications and alerts based upon those QA and test systems. So your productions may very well generate critical alerts at 2 o'clock in the morning, but your QA and test ones hopefully don't want waking you up at 2 o'clock in the morning because a QA or test dev system is down. Hopefully QA and test is not important enough to wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning to let you know. Or you can split that all out and have a separate management group for QA test, separate management group for production. The benefit to that is it's much easier to be able to control your subscriptions and the rest because your QA test is all QA test and your production is all production. What that also gives you is it gives you a great environment, better even than all-in-one environment, to be able to test things like updating management packs, custom management pack development, as well as cumulative update testing. So those are good reasons to split these. And most of my large-scale clients, I'm seeing 2 separate environments for the exact reason. You also may have to add a management group if you're exceeding the number of agents. I believe from the documentation that I've seen most recently, we're still at 10,000 agents per management group, but I should have prefaced this entire discussion with this one statement. Everything about Ops Manager 2012 is still under development. It's not a released product yet. Haven't even officially hit release candidate, so everything is subject to change. But I'm giving you all the information that I've got as of this moment in time. So I believe 10,000 agents per management group is still the current way that we would architect these. You also want to look at this, you might want to generate another management group for separation of administrative control. I mentioned my Ireland example where I may have a localized autonomous IT group over there. I may want to generate their own management group so that they can control their systems and nobody else can control theirs. We could put them in the same management group and do custom distributed or custom groups that are dynamic and then strict access to those particular groups so that they only see their stuff, but we're still not giving them complete autonomy because anybody who's an ops manager administrator can also administer their set of systems that are part of the same management group. So that's something you want to look at in terms of adding management group. A big one to consider is management group naming. Okay, so first off, if you're upgrading your existing Ops Manager 2000 R2 environment, the management group name is going to stay the same. Okay, adding an Ops Manager 2012 as a multi-homed installation, which we'll talk about in detail here, you're going to want to use a different name. And another caveat to be aware of here is you're not to use the same name as any of the management groups that you've Service Manager. So you want to know ahead of time what you're going to do with your naming, document, make sure it's all put together and out there ahead of time because you don't want to be conflicting names. Now from a design, from a management server perspective, we're going to start from one management server. And those who are looking really carefully may notice the fact that this is listed as an MS versus an RMS. And the reason why is, in essence, as we mentioned in the last session, the RMS role has been pretty much removed. There's still an RMS emulator role, but all of the different servers are added as management servers. So we have to start from at least one. Okay. Now we may want to add management servers for things like if we're going to exceed the number of agents per management server, which is currently about 3,000 agents per management server. So we may want to add another one to that. If we want redundancy, if we want this management server to be able to handle the load if another management server goes down. And we'll talk about how agents communicate in the infrastructure now and if that's changed stayed the same in a little bit, but we do have the same current restrictions on numbers, and again, those may update before release. We also need or want a separate management server for gateway communication. So say I've got a remote location. I'll say I've got Austin as an example, Austin, Texas. And in Austin, Texas, I've got 100 servers down there, and I want to put in a gateway server for those 100 servers to be able to communicate locally with. That gateway in turn needs to talk to a management server. And the best practice is you don't want a management server that is going to have both locally installed agents reporting to it as well as gateways reporting to it. And we could go into the details as to why, but I'll give the quick synopsis as this. Management server or gateway server, management server, that gateway in this example might represent 100 different agents. 100 different agents will not get the same level of priority as an individual agent would get reporting directly to the management server. So if we took a simple example, I have 100 agents in my Austin location, and I have one agent in my, say, Dallas location where my management server is. That one agent is going to get 100 times the amount of attention that the 100 agents are going to get behind the gateway server. So what we want to do is we have dedicated gateway servers for the management servers to report to. And the architecture has also not changed related to, do we want to put a local management server in a remote location versus do we want to put a local gateway server? Management servers still communicate with the database servers on 1433, the SQL communication, and they don't work very well on remote links, and it's a slow communication. Gateway servers work much better for remote locations because they take all that local information, bring it to one box, and roll it as I explained, rolling it like a bowling ball. You know, pull it all together and roll it up to the other system. So it's a long-winded discussion on gateway communication, but that's one that's going to be important for designs going forward. You may also want to add dedicated servers for management around network communication. So now that we've got the new network monitoring capabilities within Operations Manager 2012, we have management servers that we can assign into a pool, and that pool can monitor our network devices. Gateway servers. We're going to start with 0 gateway servers. There are a couple reasons why we may want to use a gateway server, and I've explained one of these already. Let me go into these in a minute. The first is if you have servers that are outside of a forest. Ops Manager uses Kerberos, and the reason is, in essence, I've got an agent with, or a server with an agent on it, and I've got an Ops Manager server. If they're both in the same forest, each one of them can say, hey, I'm server so-and-so, hey, I'm server so-and-so, and they're both happy to be able to communicate with each other. They can prove who they are. Now, as soon as we get outside of that forest, we no longer have the Kerberos ability. So outside of the forest, it makes a lot of sense because I can use certificates. My agents in a remote forest communicate locally to their gateway server. The gateway server has a cert. The cert communicates over to the management server, which is a cert, and we preserve that chain all the way through. So for remote locations, that's pretty easy to see. For servers outside of the forest, that is. But it also works well for remote locations inside the forest. And this is something that started architecting after Ops Manager deployed. I mentioned why in remote sites, management servers don't perform that well because of their communication with the SQL database. So you can use a gateway inside the forest to be able to do the same function that it's doing outside of the forest, but you don't need the certs. So in essence, I could have my 100 servers locally, talks to my gateway server that's in the same forest as my other servers in the remote, and in the same forest management servers, and just have it gather that data and push it up. So think about that when you're designing your gateway topology, not just outside of the forest, but also potential remote locations either in or outside of the forest. You'd also want to add gateway servers for if you're going to exceed the number of agents. They're currently listed at 2,000 agents per gateway server. And for redundancy. So I may very well want to have 2 gateway servers in my remote location so that if one of those were to go down, the other one would pick up communication and route it up to management servers. Design from a database perspective. We're going to start with 1 or 2 database servers, depending upon whether we're going to be able to split the Ops Manager database and the Ops Manager data warehouse. If you can, those are great databases to be able to split because the Ops Manager database is very transactional. It pulls information, adds information very, very frequently. The data warehouse is always also gathering information, but it's designed for a larger scale database, and it's designed to be able to run reports and things of that nature. So they kind of have different disk requirements. So we want to add database servers for things like splitting Operations Manager and the Operations Manager data warehouse databases. Splitting those two allows us to be able to get a better performance out of the system. Now, the management servers still do talk with both of them, so you need to consider that in your designs, that it needs to talk with both systems, even if they're on different physical servers. You may also need to add a separate database server for audit collection services. So if you've got ACS, the ACS database is very intensive as well. It may be a good idea to add a separate database server specifically for the audit pieces. And you may want to add, high availability and clustering. This is one of the few roles that will actually support the clustering approach. We're not doing the RMS clustering anymore that we did. High availability on those is now provided by pools of management servers or potentially through virtualization solution with high availability on that portion of it. But our SQL database servers still provide high availability through the clustering function. So we can have those available on a cluster. You may also want to separate out the reporting components. This one is great for SQL reporting services, can be pushed off on its own, can coordinate with data warehouse, communicate with it. As far as I've been able to tell so far, SQL reporting services still wants its own separate instance of SQL reporting services just for Operations Manager. What I commonly see in most larger environments is a separate Ops Manager database, Ops Manager data warehouse, and a separate Ops Manager reporting server. So next, we want to talk about the area of migration. So we want to be able to look at current Ops Manager 2007 environments and how do we get from 2007 to 2012. And that's kind of the crux of what we're talking about here in this presentation. So before we hit that, what I want to go into is a series of top questions, things that have been asked on a regular basis related to Ops Manager currently. First off, basic ones, things like what can I upgrade for? Unofficial, again, as of this moment in time, we should be able to upgrade from Operations Manager 2007 R2 Cumulative Update 4. So what that means is, if you're not currently on 2007 R2, you're going to want to be looking at an upgrade if you want to do the migration. And you're also going to need to deploy the cumulative updates. For those of you who haven't deployed the cumulative updates yet, Kevin Holman does a great blog series on cumulative update deployments. He's blogged the details on the deployments for each one of those, so search on Kevin Holman and CU for Ops Manager, and you'll find a great resource for that. Now, if you're currently in the TAP or the CEP, there is a supported path to be able to go from the beta to the release candidate to the RTM. So that is good news for the people in the TAP. You don't have to do a reinstall to be able to move those forward. Now the bad news, you're not going to be able to do a direct upgrade path from MOM 2005. So if you're 2005, you're going to need to look at different options. I'll show the different migration choices that are available, and hopefully that will help us to be able to map out what our choices look like and what's going to make the most sense associated with this. The question that I get a lot about is, what agents can talk to what? So as an example, if I have an Ops Manager 2007 R2 agent, it cannot talk to a 2012 management group. It can only talk to the existing 2007 environment as stands right now. Now, however, an Ops Manager 2012 agent can talk to both Ops Manager 2012 as well as to 2012 R2 or 2007 R2 management groups. So both of those are available in essence. So that's going to be a key to something we need to be able to look into as we work through the coexistence on these. So in terms of migration and what are our options, and we're going to hit details associated with these. First option is a fresh installation, and that's not too surprising. So we can kind of start from scratch if we want to be able to do this. The second is we can do an in-place upgrade. And the third is we can do a multi-homed migration. Let's hit each of those in details. So let's start with a fresh installation. So if I have my current Operations Manager environment and no current Ops Manager environment, and I want to start from fresh, this is what I need to do. So I've got a management server or multiple management servers and multiple SQL servers. The gotchas here are listed on the left. So first off, this only runs on Windows Server 2000 R2 64-bit only, as well as 2008 Service Pack 2 and above. Got to have .NET 4.0. Y'all need to have the SQL full text search, and the SQL Server agent service does need that to automatic. And the SQL correlation engine that's listed below. So those are all requirements to be able to put a fresh installation in place. Not too difficult if you're going to start from fresh. The positives on this is this gives you a clean installation. There's a lot of organizations that I know that started on MOM 2005, and then they did a migration path into Operations Manager 2007, and then they've upgraded 2007 R2, and they've got management packs that are still kind of running on some of the legacy stuff from MOM 2005, and that can be really painful. So what we want to look at there, in essence, is the benefits versus the costs. If you do a clean installation fresh, you get to rebuild this thing. You can leave your current environment up and let it do what it's doing, and then you can go ahead and just choose specific agents that you're going to move over into the new environment. The negatives on this, just with the positives, in essence, is you're starting from scratch. So the fresh installation is pretty much just going to be used at organizations where you don't have Ops Manager already, you don't have any baggage that you need to be able to keep with you, and you're just going to deploy. Well, great. Just we'll go with the minimums in terms of, you know, the requirements and the minimums at least, and see what's there, and move from there forward. So that's our first option. Our second option is an in-place upgrade. Now, it has the same requirements on the previous screen, and to hit the highlights on those, Windows Server 2008, R2, 64-bit, SQL 2008, SP2, .NET 4.0, all of those pieces still need to be there. But if you've got an existing Ops Manager 2007 or 2007 R2 environment, you may very well not have installed on a 64-bit operating system like this or on the SQL Server associated with it. So as you can see on the right-hand side, there's a complex process flow associated with how to do this. There are some big positives. So if you want to do this, it's going to help you preserve your existing Ops Manager environment, so your R2 CU4 Plus as it currently stands. As I mentioned before, you can do the upgrades from the betas, the rest of it. But from a negatives perspective, looking at the diagram on the right, I think most people were probably thinking what I'm thinking when I first saw it, which is this is a pretty complex migration. We're doing a big architecture change here. This is not as simple as put the CD in and install an upgrade, because what we're doing, in essence, is we're architecting out the RMS, and we're also architecting previous operating systems that we ran the servers on, as well as architecting out the versions that we ran the services on before. So there's a lot of complexity built into this particular approach. On the positive sides as well, this is one of those things, if you've got it all planned out and documented and in place, you can do an entire upgrade path and pretty much not interrupt or not significantly interrupt your existing monitoring solution. The third option is what's called a multi-homed approach. From what I've seen so far on the feedback that I've gotten so far, this looks like where the majority of the Ops Manager migrations are going to go through. So what you've got in essence is an Ops Manager R2 environment, which originally had your Ops Manager 2007 agents, but now they're upgraded to Ops Manager 2012, and then you're multi-homed into your new 2012 environment. So what that gives you in essence is it allows you to be able to have the same agents still doing what they were doing before in your existing environment, and it allows you to be able to have them communicate in and then over into the migration. So as an example, I've got a client right now where we've got Ops Manager 2007 R2 in production, and from that Ops Manager 2007 R2 environment, we picked a series of agents, and we've actually upgraded those agents to Ops 2012, and we have reporting to an Ops Manager 2012 environment, as well as the original 2007 environment. So it can be done to be able to put these things coexisting. From a negatives perspective, there is some increased overhead because you're monitoring with both different systems, and it's potentially going to have a longer transition time, because what you're doing is you're bringing up a whole brand new monitoring environment. So most of the people who do this, what they're going to do is they'll choose groups of servers to be able to migrate over at a time and say, now this group of servers has been multi-homed, we've replicated the monitoring functionality that we want, we go ahead and move it over into the new environment. So moving into live maps in Ops Manager 2012. I asked the guys from Civision a series of questions that I thought people would really want to know related to their product for existing customers. So here's the first question. Will I need to migrate or need to upgrade live maps? Yes, live map V6 is required for Ops 2012 support. Beta version is available. I've actually been using that beta, and it seems to be really functional. I haven't had any problems with it yet. So, good question on that one. Next, will I need a new live maps license? Because for those who are existing live maps clients, remember that it's licensed by the management group. We know in some cases we're actually changing the management groups. So a new license will be required. Existing customers with valid support, valid support and maintenance contract to be eligible for discounts. You'll need to talk to the Civision folks for details around that. Will the maps that I created in Ops 2007 work with Operations Manager 2012? Yes, all your maps that were created in 2000 will work seamlessly with those that you created in 2012. And for more information, you may want to check out our Live Maps and Migrating Operations Manager 2012 information at the blog.com area. All right, from a deployment perspective. All right, so as we get into deployment, first thing I want to start with is how do we get to Ops Manager 2012? And before we get there, I wanted to hit with my personal private top 10 in terms of what you really want to think about. This is actually drawn from a client that I did some work with recently who is starting from scratch. And this list is, in essence, the summary of what I learned the hard way from if I was going to do it all over again in 2012, what would I do differently? First off, from an architectural perspective, split them up. Keep your database servers separately if you can. Keep your reporting servers separate if you can. Have enough management servers in place that you can keep things balanced around. Trying to short the number of operating systems and splits of the architecture will oftentimes enter into a bottleneck condition, which is exactly what we want to avoid. Second, design for the future. Even if you're going to be deploying Ops Manager 2007 R2 at this point in time, take a look at what's going on out there from the new designs. Take a look at what's coming with Ops 2012. As an example, if you're going to do a 2007 R2 deployment, I'd go ahead and build it up on the latest version with the cumulative update on a 64-bit operating system running on SQL 2008, the latest version in essence. And also you want to think about things like management, network management. Do I need separate management servers for those? Go with the latest version, so whatever's latest and greatest. I've had multiple times where I've done deployments where we've had problems and then we apply the cumulative updates and the problems go away. Do your tuning with groups. A whole separate webinar related to tuning with groups, with dynamic groups in particular. The more that you can do your tuning to a group of servers versus an individual server, more usable it is. You can take that from your QA environment and move it into your production environment. It just helps a lot. Big one, have standards for your overrides and management pack names. Define this before you start your deployment. Override management packs, most organizations will do things like my organization name under my organization name and then the function and then an override or something of that nature. It doesn't really matter to me what you call them as long as you have a documented standard that's easy to access from your Ops Manager environment. A great trick on this, by the way, put this in SharePoint, your information, make it readily available, and put a link for a web page in your Ops Manager console called Ops Documentation right up at the top. So you can click on that and you can actually see whatever documentation you've got related to your Ops Manager environment. Build a test and dev environment. We talked about that before. This is critical for being able to test things effectively, especially if you're going to do your own management pack authoring. Document your overrides and your custom management packs. Nothing more frustrating, we see this daily, than trying to disassemble an existing environment where nobody's documented any of the overrides that they put in place or any of the custom management packs that they've created. Document them, put them out there, share them in put them in SharePoint and make them readily accessible. Less is more when it comes to notifications. Keep your notifications down to things that are important enough that you want to be woken up to. So your critical notifications, 2 a.m., something's critical, send me an alert, those types of things, versus I want every single alert that occurs, whether it's warning or informational or critical, and whether it's new or closed. Big one here is get a win. In terms of win, what I mean is find a group that needs Ops Manager really badly, that they have to be able to monitor the environment, and give them everything that they need. Give them an environment where when they log in, see only their servers, and they have their own dashboards, and you empower them, and you let them become your advocates for Ops Manager and the rest of the environment. If possible, phase in your management packs. Just adding all the management packs and all the servers at one time can result in an overload of information, and trying to even be able to figure it out can be very, very difficult. So if you can, phase in your management packs. What about deployment? What are we doing from a deployment perspective? How are we going to make this work? First and foremost, from the lessons in the field, installation is really a small portion of an Ops Manager environment or deployment engagement. It doesn't take that long to install the bits. However, there's some interesting stuff coming related to that. The screenshot on the right is from what's called the new System Center Unified Installer. So this was demonstrated at a user group meeting a while back, and they showed how it can install all of the different components of System Center from a single Orchestrator deployment. So that's something to look into. They've actually done a full System Center deployment, which I personally did. Deployment and installation alone took me about 12 hours. They did a concurrent deployment with this tool in about 3 hours for all the products. The majority of the time that you're going to spend on Ops Manager is going to be on tuning, configuring, and resolving your alerts. Fifth integration is integration. Ops Manager itself is a great product, but you need to think about where would it integrate within other System Center products. Service managers come into the forefront on this one with the alert connector. So I mentioned the example before, do we want to auto-generate tickets? This is really easy in Service Manager. I can just tell it, hey, this is what I want. Here's my Ops Manager server. Here's the conditions of this particular alert that I'm looking for, generate a ticket for it. We can also get CIs out of this, so we can actually see our distributed applications and they link in. Integration also is important from an orchestrator perspective. Orchestrator includes the IPs for all different System Center products, including Operations Manager. I've shown a screenshot here with just some of the pieces that are available in the Orchestrator Runbook Designer. So we can respond to conditions in Ops Manager, and we can automate them through Orchestrator. So we will probably see a lot less of the diagnostics and recoveries going forward, and a lot more of Orchestrator workflows built to do these types of things. Virtual Machine Manager, another piece that also ties into this. It provides pro integration, maintenance mode integration, and other pieces, which allows you to be able to do a lot of different pieces. So there are virtual machine management packs that integrate into Ops Manager and give you more power from that. So the management packs also integrate for all of System products. So we've got Config Manager and Data Protection Manager and Ops Manager and Orchestrator and the rest that you're seeing here. So the expectation is that we will have updated management packs for all of the 2012 products, hopefully shipping when Ops Manager ships. If not, see it within 3 months of ship of Ops Manager to pull these things together. So what my perspective on this is this is kind of integrating, and it's giving you a lot more benefit from integrating multiple different System Center products versus just deploying the one. And if y'all will go with me on this for a minute, please hopefully don't laugh at me too much. But this is how I see things in terms of System Center. And I got to give the warning, this will you will never look at this the same after you've seen the graphic. So this is my shout out to the people who were born in the same generations that I was, 70s and 80s. Here's how I see it. Red line, Operations Manager. Green line, Configuration Manager. Blue line, Data Protection Manager. Yellow line, Virtual Machine Manager. Black line, Orchestrator and Service Manager. Put those all together, get Voltron, if you prefer, System Center 2012. All right, I didn't hear all the groans in the audience because I know all your audios are muted at this point in time. Quick recap in terms of where we're at with a release dates perspective. First public release of Ops 2012 beta was 7/21. We're still expecting a release candidate. My gut feeling on that is very, very soon. RTM, as well as general availability. Microsoft did commit again at MMS 2011 that all System Center products would have their new revisions released before MMS 2012. And let's go straight to Q&A. All right, if you guys don't mind, if you would choose some of the questions out of Q&A, I'm having a little technical glitch here, and I'm trying to get the list of Q&A questions going right now.
Okay. Rob, I'm going to go ahead and make sure you're unmuted for this as well. There we go. We should be able to hear you now, Rob. Maybe not yet.
Okay. All right, if you don't mind, maybe you could read me whichever questions you see in terms of order of kind of maybe when they showed up, and we'll try to address as many of them as we can. How long have we got for Q&A?
Looks like we're about 3 minutes left in our hour.
Okay, well, what we'll do then is we'll take the full list of Q&A questions, and if possible, we'll do the same thing that we did last time, which was to blog on those. So if you have any Q&A questions, please route them in. Make sure that they're in the Q&A section, okay?
Yep. Hey, Cameron, this is Rob.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
Great. One recurring theme that would be good to address in our final 3 minutes here is around multi-homing in terms of licensing and any potential impact on that extra monitoring to the infrastructure. Maybe if you could address that, that would be, I think, quite useful and answer a number of questions here.
Excellent. Well, first off, let me start with potential overhead associated with it. There will be an increase in utilization associated with those systems because they're doing twice the number of workflows that they were doing because they'll be reporting to both systems. In the production environment where I've done this so far, we did not see any noticeable increase between the two different systems between the systems that we deployed after we had put them on multi-homed versus before multi-homed. From a licensing perspective, we are bringing up a brand new set of Ops Manager servers. So my expectation is that in essence, we're increasing our licensing requirements from a management server perspective during that coexistence time frame. The agents themselves should already be licensed because they're being monitored, so I don't think we'd see a change on that side. And please feel free to add your thoughts as well. Okay, so let's assume that that covers what y'all were looking for on that. Is there a second one that we want to go ahead and grab from the list? There's one I see here about what about third-party management pack compatibility with 2007 and 2012? From Michael, my understanding is that the 2007 management pack should be fully compatible with 2012. One of the big challenges that they had is those management packs that were designed to work off the RMS, but now with the RMS emulator role, they point that direction. So I would expect that will be fine. There may be some management pack upgrades, like as an example, we're seeing the Civision third-party management packs are going to be upgraded to be compatible with 2012. I've also got a question here from Michael about what about SNMP MIB tables? Are they supported now? SNMP is still kind of a little bit challenging from what I'm hearing in Ops 2012. We can identify things much more quickly. We can automatically do monitoring for devices that are identified. We talked about this in the last presentation a little bit. It's like 800 and some devices that are available. But in terms of actual, can I take a MIB and import a MIB and then use this to be able to generate my own custom monitoring? I don't believe that functionality is available in 2012 from the versions that I've seen so far. Rob or Ron, do you see any other critical questions from the Q&A that we should address?
One more I see that would be great is around preservation of historical data through the upgrade scenario.
Excellent. So preservation of the data should be preserved going from your Ops Manager 2007 to your 2012 environment if you're going to do an upgrade. So that is one benefit, and that's a good point. I should have listed that on the slides. That's a benefit associated with doing the upgrade path. It does do changes to the data warehouse, but the data should be retained in it. Now, if you're going to do a fresh installation, obviously you're not going to keep the data, and if you're going to do a multi-home, you're going to cut over to the new environment, so you won't keep the historical data in that way either. I would like to pass a thank you to Cliff Parker for pointing out that at least I didn't use Power Rangers on my Visio animation there. Any other questions we want to tackle while we've got everybody on the line here? Let's see. Gene has a good question about how to get more information about OM12, how notifications will work behind the scenes, more trackable debug notifications. Hey guys, would you make sure that we've got that one? That would be a good one for us to blog on.
Yeah.
We got that question. Question related to console limits. I believe the console limits are the same as they were in the previous release. Now, however, with the new Silverlight-based consoles and the functionality that's available in the web-based consoles, I think you're going to see a whole heck of a lot more people able to really use the web-based consoles, which should help a lot with the overhead associated with it. And again, remember, because Sebastian's the one asking this question, remember this is all still beta, so we'll have to see where things go from there. I have not seen official limits on web console yet, but you can install it in multiple different areas, even put a balancer on top of it so it could balance across multiple different systems and be able to split the load among different servers in the environment. So that is excellent. Hopefully, and I apologize, I'm having problems with the Q&A pieces of it today in terms of seeing a list of it, but hopefully we hit the majority of the Q&A questions, and I'd really like to thank everybody who attended on this today. It was really great to be able to get a chance to talk about this and see where we're heading with the next version.
All right, so it looks like we've just gone over time and we are starting to lose participants. Did you want to talk to this slide and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, the last slide I've got listed here is really interested in what's going on related to Ops Manager 2012 from a migration perspective. These are some great resources that are available. You might just want to grab a screenshot on that real quick. There's the download for Ops Manager 2012 currently in beta. Pete Zerger discussion on migration to Ops Manager 2012. There's some good TechNet links with it, including a TechNet meeting. The process flow diagram that I showed for your multi-home, your in-place upgrade approach is listed there. And then actually Marnix Wolf is going to be working on a blog series related to be able to do your SQL migration specifically for Ops Manager 2012. So if you don't follow his blog, you definitely need to check out Marnix's blog for that.
Okay. And with that, we're about 5 minutes overtime now. If it's okay with you two, we'll go ahead and wrap things up at this point. Any final comments from either of you?
Just thank you all for putting this together. Appreciate it, and thank you to everybody who attended, because it's great to be able to have this many people attending on a webinar.
It was a great turnout. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for the sporadic technical glitches. We will get a recording of the webinar up on the website in the next couple of days, get the Q&A posted, and slides will be available for future reference as well. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end the event now. Thank you.